Chapter 1.27 How a Monk of Seville saved the close of the abbey from being ransacked by the enemy. So much they did, and so far they went pillaging and stealing, that at last they came to Seville, where they robbed both men and women and took all they could catch. Nothing was either too hot or too heavy for them. Although the plague was there in the most part of all the houses, they nevertheless entered everywhere, then plundered and carried away all that was within, and yet for all this not one of them took any hurt, which is a most wonderful case. For the curates, vicars, preachers, physicians, chirurgeons, and apothecaries, who went to visit, to dress, to cure, to heal, to preach unto and admonish those that were sick, were all dead of the infection, and these devilish robbers and murderers caught never any harm at all. Whence comes this to pass, my masters? I beseech you think upon it. The town being thus pillaged, they went unto the abbey with a horrible noise and tumult, but they found it shut and made fast against them. Whereupon the body of the army marched forward towards a pass or ford called the David, except 7 companies of foot and 200 lancers, who, staying there, broke down the walls of the close to waste, spoil, and make havoc of all the vines and vintage within that place. The monks, poor devils, knew not in that extremity to which of all their sancts they should vow themselves. Nevertheless, at all adventures they rang the bells ad capitulum capitulants. There it was decreed that they should make a fair procession, stuffed with good lectures, prayers, and litanies contra hostium insidias, and jolly responses pro pace. There was then in the abbey a claustral monk, called Friar John of the Funnels and Gobbets, in French Taumiras, young, gallant, frisk, lusty, nimble, quick, active, bold, adventurous, resolute, tall, lean, wide-mouthed, long-nosed, a fair dispatcher of morning prayers, unbridler of masses, and runner over of vigils. And to conclude summarily in a word, a right monk, if ever there was any, since the monking world monked a monkery. For the rest, a clerk even to the teeth in matter of breviary. This monk, hearing the noise that the enemy made within the enclosure of the vineyard, went out to see what they were doing, and perceiving that they were cutting and gathering the grapes, whereon was grounded the foundation of all their next year's wine, returned unto the choir of the church where the other monks were, all amazed and astonished like so many bell-melters. Whom when he heard sing, I am, nim, p ni nene tum ni num and I me, ko o no ni no rum denum num. It is well shit, well sung, said he. By the virtue of God, why do not you sing, panniers, farewell, vintage is done. The devil snatch me, if they be not already within the middle of our close, and cut so well both vines and grapes, that, by Cod's body, there will not be found for these 4 years to come so much as a gleaning in it. By the belly of Sanct James, what shall we poor devils drink the while? Lord God, de mihi potum. Then said the prior of the convent, what should this drunken fellow do here? Let him be carried to prison for troubling the divine service. Nay, said the monk, the wine service, let us behave ourselves so that it be not troubled. For you yourself, my lord prior, love to drink of the best, and so doth every honest man. Never yet did a man of worth dislike good wine, it is a monastical apophthegm. But these responses that you chant here, by G, are not in season. Wherefore is it that our devotions were instituted to be short in the time of harvest and vintage, and long in the Advent and all the winter? The late friar, Massipelos, of good memory, a true zealous man, or else I give myself to the devil, of our religion, told me, and I remember it well, how the reason was, that in this season we might press and make the wine, and in winter whiff it up. Hark you, my masters, you that love the wine, cop's body, follow me. For Sanct Anthony burn me as freely as a faggot, if they get leave to taste 1 drop of the liquor that will not now come and fight for relief of the vine. Hog's belly, the goods of the church. Ha, no. What the devil, Sanct Thomas of England was well content to die for them. If I died in the same cause, should not I be a sanct likewise? Yes. Yet shall not I die there for all this, for it is I that must do it to others and send them a-packing. As he spake this, he threw off his great monk's habit, and laid hold upon the staff of the cross, which was made of the heart of a sorbeple tree, it being of the length of a lance, round, of a full grip, and a little powdered with lilies called flower de luce, the workmanship whereof was almost all defaced and worn out. Thus went he out in a fair long-skirted jacket, putting his frock scarf-wise athwart his breast, and in this equipage, with his staff, shaft or truncheon of the cross, laid on so lustily, brisk, and fiercely upon his enemies, who, without any order or ensign or trumpet or drum, were busied in gathering the grapes of the vineyard. For the cornets, guidons, and ensign-bearers had laid down their standards, banners, and colors by the wall sides. The drummers had knocked out the heads of their drums on one end to fill them with grapes. The trumpeters were loaded with great bundles of bunches and huge knots of clusters. In sum, every one of them was out of array, and all in disorder. He hurried, therefore, upon them so rudely, without crying gare or beware, that he overthrew them like hogs, tumbled them over like swine, striking athwart and alongst, and by one means or other laid so about him, after the old fashion of fencing, that to some he beat out their brains, to others he crushed their arms, battered their legs, and bethwacked their sides till their ribs cracked with it. To others again he unjointed the spondyles or knuckles of the neck, disfigured their chaps, gashed their faces, made their cheeks hang flapping on their chin, and so swinged and ballumed them that they fell down before him like hay before a mower. To some others he spoiled the frame of their kidneys, marred their backs, broke their thigh bones, pashed in their noses, poached out their eyes, cleft their mandibles, tore their jaws, dug in their teeth into their throat, shook asunder their omoplates or shoulder blades, spacelated their shins, mortified their shanks, inflamed their ankles, heaved off of the hinges their ischies, their sciatica or hip gout, dislocated the joints of their knees, squattered into pieces the bots or pestles of their thighs, and so thumped. Mauled and belabored them everywhere, that never was corn so thick and threefold threshed upon by ploughmen's flails, as were the pitifully disjointed members of their mangled bodies under the merciless baton of the cross. If any offered to hide himself amongst the thickest of the vines, he laid him squat as a flounder, bruised the ridge of his back, and dashed his reins like a dog. If any thought by flight to escape, he made his head to fly in pieces by the lamboidal commissure, which is a seam in the hinder part of the skull. If any one did scramble up into a tree, thinking there to be safe, he rent up his peroné and impaled him in at the fundament. If any of his old acquaintance happened to cry out, "Ha, Friar John, my friend Friar John, quarter, quarter, I yield myself to you I render myself. So thou shalt," said he, "and must, whether thou wouldst or no, and withal render and yield up thy soul to all the devils in hell." Then suddenly gave them dronos, that is, so many knocks, thumps, raps, dints, thwacks, and bangs, as sufficed to warn Pluto of their coming and dispatch them a-going. If any was so rash and full of temerity as to resist him to his face, then was it he did show the strength of his muscles, for without more ado he did transpierce him, by running him in at the breast, through the mediastine and the heart. Others, again, he so quashed and bebumped, that, with a sound bounce under the hollow of their short ribs, he overturned their stomachs so that they died immediately. To some, with a smart souse on the epigaster, he would make their midriff swag, then, redoubling the blow, gave them such a home-push on the navel that he made their puddings to gush out. To others through their ballocks he pierced their bumgut, and left not bowel, tripe, nor entrail in their body that had not felt the impetuosity, fierceness, and fury of his violence. Believe that it was the most horrible spectacle that ever one saw. Some cried unto Sanct Barbe, others to Saint George. "O the Holy Lady Nituch," said one, "the good Sanctess." "O Our Lady of Succors," said another, "help, help." Others cried, "Our Lady of Connaught, of Loretto, of good tidings, on the other side of the water Saint Mary over." Some vowed a pilgrimage to Saint James, and others to the Holy Handkerchief at Chambery, which 3 months after that burnt so well in the fire that they could not get one thread of it saved. Others sent up their vows to Saint Cadwin, others to Saint John d'Angely, and to Saint Eutropius of Zaintes. Others again invoked Saint Mesmes of Chinon, Saint Martin of Cannes, Saint Claude of Sines, the holy relics of Lorizet, with 1,000 other jolly little sancts and santrals. Some died without speaking, others spoke without dying. Some died in speaking, others spoke in dying. Others shouted as loud as they could confession, confession, confiteor miserere in manus. So great was the cry of the wounded, that the prior of the abbey with all his monks came forth, who, when they saw these poor wretches so slain amongst the vines, and wounded to death, confessed some of them. But whilst the priests were busied in confessing them, the little monkeys ran all to the place where Friar John was, and asked him wherein he would be pleased to require their assistance. To which he answered that they should cut the throats of those he had thrown down upon the ground. They presently, leaving their outer habits and cowls upon the rails, began to throttle and make an end of those whom he had already crushed. Can you tell with what instruments they did it? With fair gullies, which are little hulchback demi-knives, the iron tool whereof is 2 inches long, and the wooden handle 1 inch thick, and 3 inches in length, wherewith the little boys in our country cut ripe walnuts in 2 while they are yet in the shell, and pick out the kernel. And they found them very fit for the expediting of that wesan-slitting exploit. In the meantime, Friar John, with his formidable baton of the cross, got to the breach which the enemies had made, and there stood to snatch up those that endeavored to escape. Some of the monketos carried the standards, banners, ensigns, guidons, and colors into their cells and chambers to make garters of them. But when those that had been shriven would have gone out at the gap of the said breach, the sturdy monk quashed and felled them down with blows, saying, "These men have had confession and are penitent souls. They have got their absolution and gained the pardons. They go into paradise as straight as a sickle, or as the way is to Fay, like Crooked Lane at Eastcheap." Thus by his prowess and valor were discomfited all those of the army that entered into the close of the abbey, unto the number of 13,622, besides the women and little children, which is always to be understood. Never did Maugus the hermit bear himself more valiantly with his bourdon or pilgrim staff against the Saracens, of whom is written in the Acts of the 4 sons of Iman, than did this monk against his enemies with the staff of the cross. Chapter 1.28 How Picrochole stormed and took by assault the rock Clermond, and of Grangacier's unwillingness and aversion from the undertaking of war. Whilst the monk did thus skirmish, as we have said, against those which were entered within the close, Picrochole in great haste passed the ford of Vida very especial pass with all his soldiers, and set upon the rock Clermond, where there was made him no resistance at all. And, because it was already night, he resolved to quarter himself and his army in that town, and to refresh himself of his pugnative choler. In the morning he stormed and took the bulwarks and castle, which afterwards he fortified with rampiers, and furnished with all ammunition requisite, intending to make his retreat there, if he should happen to be otherwise worsted. For it was a strong place, both by art and nature, in regard of the stance and situation of it. But let us leave them there, and return to our good Gargantua, who is at Paris very assiduous and earnest at the study of good letters and athletical exercitations, and to the good old man Grangacier his father, who after supper warmeth his ballocks by a good, clear, great fire, and waiting upon the broiling of some chestnuts, is very serious in drawing scratches on the hearth, with a stick burnt at the one end, wherewith they did stir up the fire, telling to his wife and the rest of the family pleasant old stories and tales of former times. Whilst he was thus employed, one of the shepherds which did keep the vines, named Pilate, came towards him, and to the full related the enormous abuses which were committed, and the excessive spoil that was made by Picrochole, king of Lerne, upon his lands and territories, and how he had pillaged, wasted, and ransacked all the country, except the enclosure at Seville, which Friar John de Centaumiras to his great honor had preserved. And that at the same present time the said king was in the rock Clermond, and there, with great industry and circumspection, was strengthening himself and his whole army. Hallis, alas. Said Grangacier, "What is this, good people? Do I dream, or is it true that they tell me? Picrochole, my ancient friend of old time, of my own kindred and alliance, comes he to invade me? What moves him? What provokes him? What sets him on? What drives him to it? Who hath given him this counsel? Ho, 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 my God, my Savior, help me, inspire me, and advise me what I shall do. Protest, I swear before thee, so be thou favorable to me, if ever I did him or his subjects any damage or displeasure, or committed any the least robbery in his country. But on the contrary, I have succored and supplied him with men, money, friendship, and counsel, upon any occasion wherein could be steadable for the improvement of his good. That he hath therefore at this nick of time so outraged and wronged me, it cannot be but by the malevolent and wicked spirit. Good God, thou knowest my courage, for nothing can be hidden from thee. If perhaps he be grown mad, and that thou hast sent him hither to me for the better recovery and re-establishment of his brain, grant me power and wisdom to bring him to the yoke of thy holy will by good discipline. Ho, 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 my good people, my friends and my faithful servants, must I hinder you from helping me? Alas, my old age required henceforward nothing else but rest, and all the days of my life I have labored for nothing so much as peace. But now I must, I see it well, load with arms my poor, weary, and feeble shoulders, and take in my trembling hand the lance and horseman's mace, to succor and protect my honest subjects. Reason will have it so, for by their labor am I entertained, and with their sweat am I nourished, I, my children, and my family. This notwithstanding, I will not undertake war, until I have first tried all the ways and means of peace, that I resolve upon. Then assembled he his council, and proposed the matter as it was indeed. Whereupon it was concluded that they should send some discreet man unto Picrochole, to know wherefore he had thus suddenly broken the peace, and invaded those lands unto which he had no right nor title. Furthermore, that they should send for Gargantua, and those under his command, for the preservation of the country and defense thereof now at need. All this pleased Grangousier very well, and he commanded that so it should be done. Presently, therefore, he sent the Basque his lackey to fetch Gargantua with all diligence, and wrote him as followeth. Chapter 1.29. The tenor of the letter which Grangousier wrote to his son Gargantua. The fervency of thy studies did require that I should not in a long time recall thee from that philosophical rest thou now enjoyest, if the confidence reposed in our friends and ancient confederates had not at this present disappointed the assurance of my old age. But seeing such is my fatal destiny, that I should be now disquieted by those in whom I trusted most, I am forced to call thee back to help the people and goods which by the right of nature belong unto thee. For even as arms are weak abroad, if there be not counsel at home, so is that study vain and counsel unprofitable which in a due and convenient time is not by virtue executed and put in effect. My deliberation is not to provoke, but to appease, not to assault, but to defend, not to conquer, but to preserve my faithful subjects and hereditary dominions, into which Picrochole is entered in a hostile manner without any ground or cause, and from day to day pursueth his furious enterprise with that height of insolence that is intolerable to freeborn spirits. I have endeavored to moderate his tyrannical choler, offering him all that which I thought might give him satisfaction, and oftentimes have I sent lovingly unto him to understand wherein, by whom, and how he found himself to be wronged. But of him could I obtain no other answer but a mere defiance, and that in my lands he did pretend only to the right of a civil correspondency and good behavior, whereby I knew that the eternal God hath left him to the disposure of his own free will and sensual appetite, which cannot choose but be wicked, if by divine grace it be not continually guided in to contain him within his duty, and bring him to know himself, hath sent him hither to me by a grievous token. Therefore, my beloved son, as soon as thou canst, upon sight of these letters, repair hither with all diligence, to succor not me so much, which nevertheless by natural piety thou oughtest to do, as thine own people, which by reason thou mayest save and preserve. The exploit shall be done with as little effusion of blood as may be, and if possible by means far more expedient, such as military policy, devices, and stratagems of war, we shall save all the souls, and send them home as merry as crickets unto their own houses. My dearest son, the peace of Jesus Christ our Redeemer be with thee. Salute from me Ponocrates, Gymnasts, and Eudaemon. The 20th of September. Thy father Grangousier. Chapter 1.3. How Ulrich Galet was sent unto Picrochole. The letters being dictated, signed, and sealed, Grangousier ordained that Ulrich Galet, master of the requests, a very wise and discreet man, of whose prudence and sound judgment he had made trial in several difficult and debateful matters, should go unto Picrochole to show what had been decreed amongst them. At the same hour departed the good man Galet, and having passed the ford, asked at the miller that dwelt there in what condition Picrochole was. Who answered him that his soldiers had left him neither cock nor hen, that they were retired and shut up into the rock Clermond, and that he would not advise him to go any further for fear of the scouts, because they were enormously furious. Which he easily believed, and therefore lodged that night with the miller. The next morning he went with a trumpeter to the gate of the castle, and required the guards he might be admitted to speak with the king of somewhat that concerned him. These words being told unto the king, he would by no means consent that they should open the gate, but getting upon the top of the bulwark, said unto the ambassador, What is the news? What have you to say? Then the ambassador began to speak as followeth. Chapter 1.31. The speech made by Gallet to Picrochole. There cannot arise amongst men a juster cause of grief than when they receive hurt and damage where they may justly expect for favor and goodwill. And not without cause, though without reason, have many, after they had fallen into such a calamitous accident, esteemed this indignity less supportable than the loss of their own lives, in such sort that, if they have not been able by force of arms nor any other means, by reach of wit or subtlety, to stop them in their course and restrain their fury, they have fallen into desperation, and utterly deprived themselves of this light. It is therefore no wonder if King Grangousier, my master, be full of high displeasure and much disquieted in mind upon thy outrageous and hostile coming. But truly it would be a marvel if he were not sensible of, and moved with the incomparable abuses and injuries perpetrated by thee and thine upon those of his country, towards whom there hath been no example of inhumanity omitted. Which in itself is to him so grievous, for the cordial affection wherewith he hath always cherished his subjects, that more it cannot be to any mortal man. Yet in this, above human apprehension, is it to him the more grievous that these wrongs and sad offences have been committed by thee and thine, who, time out of mind, from all antiquity, thou and thy predecessors have been in a continual league and amity with him and all his ancestors, which even until this time you have as sacred together inviolably preserved, kept and entertained so well that not he and his only, but the very barbarous nations of the Poictevins, Bretons, Manso, and those that dwell beyond the Isles of the Canaries, and that of Isabella, have thought it as easy to pull down the firmament, and to set up the depths above the clouds, as to make a breach in your alliance, and have been so afraid of it in their enterprises that they have never dared to provoke, incense, or endamage the one for fear of the other. Nay, which is more, this sacred league hath so filled the world, that there are few nations at this day inhabiting throughout all the continent and isles of the ocean, who have not ambitiously aspired to be received into it, upon your own covenants and conditions, holding your joint confederacy in as high esteem as their own territories and dominions, in such sort, that from the memory of man there hath not been either prince or league so wild and proud that durst have offered to invade, I say not your countries, but not so much as those of your confederates. And if, by rash and heady counsel, they have attempted any new design against them, as soon as they heard the name and title of your alliance, they have suddenly desisted from their enterprises. What rage and madness, therefore, doth now incite thee, all old alliance infringed, all amity trod under foot, and all right violated, thus in a hostile manner to invade his country, without having been by him or his in anything prejudiced, wronged, or provoked? Where is faith? Where is law? Where is reason? Where is humanity? Where is the fear of God? Dost thou think that these atrocious abuses are hidden from the eternal Spirit, and the supreme God, who is the just rewarder of all our undertakings? If thou so think, thou deceivest thyself, for all things shall come to pass as in his incomprehensible judgment he hath appointed. Is it thy fatal destiny, or influences of the stars, that would put an end to thy so long enjoyed ease and rest? For that all things have their end and period, so is that, when they are come to the superlative point of their greatest height, they are in a trice tumbled down again, as not being able to abide long in that state. This is the conclusion and end of those who cannot by reason and temperance moderate their fortunes and prosperities. But if it be predestinated that thy happiness and ease must now come to an end, must it needs be by wronging my kingdom by whom thou wert established. If thy house must come to ruin, should it therefore in its fall crush the heels of him that set it up? The matter is so unreasonable, and so dissonant from common sense, that hardly can it be conceived by human understanding, and altogether incredible unto strangers, till by the cert and undoubted effects thereof it be made apparent that nothing is either sacred or holy to those who, having emancipated themselves from God and reason, do merely follow the perverse affections of their own depraved nature. If any wrong had been done by us to thy subjects and dominions, if we had favored thy ill willers, if we had not assisted thee in thy need, if thy name and reputation had been wounded by us, or, to speak more truly, if the calumniating spirit, tempting to induce thee to evil, had, by false illusions and deceitful fantasies, put into thy conceit the impression of a thought that we had done unto thee anything unworthy of our ancient correspondence and friendship, thou oughtest first to have inquired out the truth, and afterwards by a seasonable warning to admonish us thereof, and we should have so satisfied thee, according to thine own heart's desire, that thou shouldst have had occasion to be contented. But, O eternal God, what is thy enterprise? Wouldst thou, like a perfidious tyrant, thus spoil and lay waste my master's kingdom? Hast thou found him so silly and blockish, that he would not or so destitute of men and money, of counsel and skill in military discipline, that he cannot withstand thy unjust invasion? March hence presently, and tomorrow, some time of the day, retreat unto thine own country, without doing any kind of violence or disorderly act by the way, and pay withal 1,000 besands of gold, which, in English money, amounteth to 5,000 pounds, for reparation of the damages thou hast done in this country. Half thou shalt pay tomorrow, and the other half at the Ides of May next coming, leaving with us in the meantime, for hostages, the Dukes of Turnbank, Lowbuttock, and Smalltrash, together with the Prince of Itches and Viscount of Snatchbit, Tournemule, Bosdefesses, Menuel, Gratels, Morpiel. Chapter 1.32. How Grangousier, to buy peace, caused the cakes to be restored. With that the good man Gallet held his peace, but Picrochole to all his discourse answered nothing but come and fetch them, they have ballocks fair and soft they will need, and provide some cakes for you. Then returned he to Grangousier, whom he found upon his knees bareheaded, crouching in a little corner of his cabinet, and humbly praying unto God that he would vouchsafe to assuage the choler of Picrochole, and bring him to the rule of reason without proceeding by force. When the good man came back, he asked him, "Ha, my friend, what news do you bring me?" "There is neither hope nor remedy," said Gallet. "The man is quite out of his wits and forsaken of God." "Yea, but," said Grangousier, "my friend, what cause doth he pretend for his outrages?" "He did not show me any cause at all," said Gallet, "only that in a great anger he spoke some words of cakes. I cannot tell if they have done any wrong to his cake bakers." "I will know," said Grangousier, "the matter thoroughly, before I resolve any more upon what is to be done." Then sent he to learn concerning that business, and found by true information that his men had taken violently some cakes from Picrochole's people, and that Marquet's head was broken with a slacky or short cudgel. That, nevertheless, all was well paid, and that the said Marquet had first hurt Forgier with a stroke of his whip athwart the legs. And it seemed good to his whole council that he should defend himself with all his might. "Notwithstanding all this," said Grangousier, "seeing the question is but about a few cakes, I will labor to content him, for I am very unwilling to wage war against him." He inquired then what quantity of cakes they had taken away, and understanding that it was but some 4 or 5 dozen, he commanded 5 cartloads of them to be baked that same night, and that there should be 1 full of cakes made with fine butter, fine yolks of eggs, fine saffron, and fine spice, to be bestowed upon Marquet, unto whom likewise he directed to be given 700,003 philips, that is, at 3 shillings the piece, 105,000 pounds and 9 shillings of English money, for reparation of his losses and hindrances, and for satisfaction of the chirurgeon that had dressed his wound. And furthermore settled upon him, and his for ever in freehold, the apple orchard called La Pomardière, for the conveyance and passing of all which was sent Gallet, who by the way as they went made them gather near the willow tree's great store of boughs, canes, and reeds, wherewith all the carriers were enjoined to garnish and deck their carts, and each of them to carry one in his hand, as himself likewise did, thereby to give all men to understand that they demanded but peace, and that they came to buy it. Being come to the gate, they required to speak with Picrochole from Grangousier. Picrochole would not so much as let them in, nor go to speak with them, but sent them word that he was busy, and that they should deliver their mind to Captain Tauquedillin, who was then planting a piece of ordnance upon the wall. Then said the good man unto him, My lord, to ease you of all this labor, and to take away all excuses why you may not return unto our former alliance, we do here presently restore unto you the cakes upon which the quarrel arose. 5 dozen did our people take away, they were well paid for. We love peace so well that we restore unto you 5 cartloads, of which this cart shall be for Marque, who doth most complain. Besides, to content him entirely, here are 700,003 philips which I deliver to him, and for the losses he may pretend to have sustained, I resign for ever the farm of the Pomardier, to be possessed in fee simple by him and his for ever, without the payment of any duty, or acknowledgement of homage, fealty, fine, or service whatsoever. And here is the tenor of the deed. And, for God's sake, let us live henceforward in peace, and withdraw yourselves merrily into your own country from within this place, unto which you have no right at all, as yourselves must needs confess, and let us be good friends as before. Tauquedillin related all this to Picrochole, and more exasperated his courage, saying to him, These clowns are afraid to some purpose. By G, Grangasir conskites himself for fear, the poor drinker. He is not skilled in warfare, nor hath he any stomach for it. He knows better how to empty the flagons, that is his art. I am of opinion that it is fit we send back the carts and the money, and, for the rest, that very speedily we fortify ourselves here, then prosecute our fortune. But what do they think to have to do with a ninnywope, to feed you thus with cakes? You may see what it is. The good usage and great familiarity, which you have had with them heretofore, hath made you contemptible in their eyes. Anoint a villain, he will prick you. Prick a villain, and he will anoint you ungentem pungit, pungentem rusticus ungit. Sa, said Picrochole, by St. James you have given a true character of them. One thing I will advise you, said Tauquedillin. We are here but badly victualled, and furnished with mouth harness very slenderly. If Grangasir should come to besiege us, I would go presently, and pluck out of all your soldiers, heads and mine own all the teeth, except 3 to each of us, and with them alone we should make an end of our provision but too soon. We shall have, said Picrochole, but too much sustenance and feeding stuff. Came we hither to eat or to fight? To fight, indeed, said Tauquedillin, yet from the paunch comes the dance, and where famine rules force is exiled. Leave off your prating, said Picrochole, and forthwith seize upon what they have brought. Then took they money and cakes, oxen and carts, and sent them away without speaking one word, only that they would come no more so near, for a reason that they would give them the morrow after. Thus, without doing anything, returned they to Grangasir, and related the whole matter unto him, subjoining that there was no hope left to draw them to peace, but by sharp and fierce wars. Chapter 1.33 How some statesmen of Picrochole, by harebrained counsel, put him in extreme danger. The carts being unloaded, and the money and cakes secured, there came before Picrochole the Duke of Smalltrash, the Earl Swashbuckler, and Captain Dirttail, Menuel, Spadison, Murdill, who said unto him, Sir, this day we make you the happiest, the most warlike and chivalrous prince that ever was since the death of Alexander of Macedonia. Be covered, said Picrochole. Gramercy, said they, we do but our duty. The manner is thus. You shall leave some captain here to have the charge of this garrison, with a party competent for keeping of the place, which, besides its natural strength, is made stronger by the rampiers and fortresses of your devising. Your army you are to divide into 2 parts, as you know very well how to do. One part thereof shall fall upon Grangasir and his forces. By it shall he be easily at the very first shock rooted, and then shall you get money by heaps, for the clown hath store of ready coin. Clown we call him, because a noble and generous prince hath never a penny, and that to hoard up treasure is but a clownish trick. The other part of the army, in the meantime, shall draw towards Anis, Zaintonge, Angoumois, and Gascony. Then march to Perigot, Medoc, and Elans, taking wherever you come, without resistance, towns, castles, and forts. Afterwards to Bayonne, St. John de Luc, to Fontarabia, where you shall seize upon all the ships, and coasting along Galicia and Portugal, shall pillage all the maritime places, even unto Lisbon, where you shall be supplied with all necessaries befitting a conqueror. By copsity Spain will yield, for they are but a race of lubies. Then are you to pass by the straits of Gibraltar, where you shall erect 2 pillars more stately than those of Hercules, to the perpetual memory of your name, and the narrow entrance there shall be called the Picrocolonal Sea. Having passed the Picrocolonal Sea, behold, Barbarossa yields himself your slave. I will, said Picrocol, give him fair quarter and spare his life. Yea, said they, so that he be content to be christened. And you shall conquer the kingdoms of Tunis, of Hippo, Argier, Bona, Coron, yea, all Barbary. Furthermore, you shall take into your hands Majorca, Minorca, Sardinia, Corsica, with the other islands of the Ligustic and Balearian seas. Going alongst on the left hand, you shall rule all Gallia Narbonensis, Provence, the Allobrogians, Genoa, Florence, Lucca, and then God-e, Rome. Our poor Monsieur the Pope dies now for fear. By my faith, said Picrocol, I will not then kiss his pantofle. Italy being thus taken, behold Naples, Calabria, Apulia, and Sicily, all ransacked and Malta too. I wish the pleasant knights of the roads heretofore would but come to resist you, that we might see their urine. I would, said Picrocol, very willingly go to Loretto. No, no, said they, that shall be at our return. From thence we will sail eastwards, and take Candia, Cyprus, Rhodes, and the Cyclade Islands, and set upon the Mora. It is ours by St. Trinian. The Lord preserve Jerusalem, for the great Soldan is not comparable to you in power. I will then, said he, cause Solomon's temple to be built. No, said they, not yet, have a little patience, stay a while, be never too sudden in your enterprises. Can you tell what Octavian Augustus said? Festina lent. It is requisite that you first have the Lesser Asia, Caria, Lycia, Pamphylia, Cilicia, Lydia, Phrygia, Mysia, Bithynia, Charasia, Satalia, Samageria, Castamna, Luga, Savasta, even unto Euphrates. Shall we see, said Picrocol, Babylon and Mount Sinai? There is no need, said they at this time. Have we not hurried up and down, traveled and twalled enough, in having transfretted and passed over the Hyrcanian Sea, marched alongst the 2 Armenias and the 3 Arabias? I, by my faith, said he, we have played the fools and are undone. Ha, poor souls! What's the matter? Said they. What shall we have, said he, to drink in these deserts? For Julian Augustus with his whole army died there for thirst, as they say. We have already, said they, given order for that. In the Syriac sea you have 9,014 great ships, laden with the best wines in the world. They arrived at Port Joppa. There they found 22,000 camels and 1,600 elephants, which you shall have taken at one hunting about Sigelmes when you entered into Libya. And, besides this, you had all the Mecca caravan. Did not they furnish you sufficiently with wine? Yes, but, said he, we did not drink it fresh. By the virtue, said they, not of a fish, a valiant man, a conqueror, who pretends and aspires to the monarchy of the world, cannot always have his ease. God be thanked that you and your men are come safe, and sound unto the banks of the river Tigris. But, said he, what doth that part of our army in the meantime, which overthrows that unworthy swillpot Grangasir? They are not idle, said they. We shall meet with them by and by. They shall have won you Brittany, Normandy, Flanders, Hainault, Brabant, Artois, Holland, Zealand. They have passed the Rhine over the bellies of the Switzers and Lansquenets, and a party of these hath subdued Luxembourg, Lorraine, Champagne, and Savoy even to Lyon, in which place they have met with your forces returning from the naval conquests of the Mediterranean Sea, and have rallied again in Bohemia, after they had plundered and sacked Suvia, Wittenberg, Bavaria, Austria, Moravia, and Styria. Then they set fiercely together upon Lubeck, Norway, Swedeland, Ree, Denmark, Gitland, Greenland, the Stirlands, even unto the frozen sea. This done, they conquered the Isles of Orkney, and subdued Scotland, England, and Ireland. From thence sailing through the sandy sea and by the Sarmates, they have vanquished and overcome Prussia, Poland, Lithuania, Russia, Wallachia, Transylvania, Hungary, Bulgaria, Turkoland, and are now at Constantinople. Come, said Picrocol, let us go join with them quickly, for I will be Emperor of Trebizond also. Shall we not kill all these dogs, Turks and Mahometans? What a devil should we do else? Said they. And you shall give their goods and lands to such as shall have served you honestly. Reason, said he, will have it so, that is but just. I give unto you the Caramania, Syria, and all the Palestine. Ha, sir, said they, it is out of your goodness. Gramercy, we thank you. God grant you may always prosper. There was there present at that time an old gentleman well experienced in the wars, a stern soldier, and who had been in many great hazards, named Echephrin, who, hearing this discourse, said, I do greatly doubt that all this enterprise will be like the tale or interlude of the pitcher full of milk, wherewith a shoemaker made himself rich in conceit. But when the pitcher was broken, he had not whereupon to dine. What do you pretend by these large conquests? What shall be the end of so many labors and crosses? Thus it shall be, said Picrochole, that when we are returned we shall sit down, rest, and be merry. But, said Echephrin, if by chance you should never come back, for the voyage is long and dangerous, were it not better for us to take our rest now, than unnecessarily to expose ourselves to so many dangers? Oh, said Swashbuckler, by G, here is a good dotard. Come, let us go hide ourselves in the corner of a chimney, and there spend the whole time of our life amongst ladies, in threading of pearls, or spinning, like Sardanapalus. He that nothing ventures hath neither horse nor mule, says Solomon. He who adventureth too much, said Echephrin, loseth both horse and mule, answered Malchan. Enough, said Picrochole, go forward. I fear nothing, but that these devilish legions of Grangasir, whilst we are in Mesopotamia, will come on our backs and charge up our rear. What course shall we then take? What shall be our remedy? A very good one, said Dirttail. A pretty little commission, which you must send unto the Muscovites, shall bring you into the field in an instant 450,000 choice men of war. Oh, that you would but make me your lieutenant general, I should for the lightest faults of any inflict great punishments. I fret, I charge, strike, I take, I kill, I slay, I play the devil. On, said Picrochole, make haste, my lads, and let him that loves me follow me. Chapter 1.34 How Gargantua left the city of Paris to succor his country, and how Gymnast encountered with the enemy. In this same very hour Gargantua, who was gone out of Paris as soon as he had read his father's letters, coming upon his great mare, had already passed the nunnery bridge, himself, Ponocrates, Gymnast, and Eudaemon, who all three, the better to enable them to go along with him, took post-horses. The rest of his train came after him by even journeys at a slower pace, bringing with them all his books and philosophical instruments. As soon as he had alighted at Peril, he was informed by a farmer of Gauget how Picrochole had fortified himself within the rock Clermond, and had sent Captain Tripet with a great army to set upon the wood of Veed and Vaugaudry, and that they had already plundered the whole country, not leaving cock nor hen, even as far as to the winepress of Billard. These strange and almost incredible news of the enormous abuses thus committed over all the land, so affrighted Gargantua that he knew not what to say nor do. But Ponocrates counselled him to go unto the Lord of Vaughan, who at all times had been their friend and confederate, and that by him they should be better advised in their business. Which they did incontinently, and found him very willing and fully resolved to assist them, and therefore was of opinion that they should send some one of his company to scout along and discover the country, to learn in what condition and posture the enemy was, that they might take counsel, and proceed according to the present occasion. Gymnast offered himself to go. Whereupon it was concluded that for his safety and the better expedition, he should have with him someone that knew the ways, avenues, turnings, windings, and rivers thereabout. Then away went he and Perlingit, the equerry or gentleman of Vaughan's horse, who scouted and espied as narrowly as they could upon all quarters without any fear. In the meantime Gargantua took a little refreshment, ate somewhat himself, the like did those who were with him, and caused to give to his mare a picotine of oats, that is, 60 quarters and 3 bushels. Gymnast and his comrade rode so long that at last they met with the enemy's forces, all scattered and out of order, plundering, stealing, robbing, and pillaging all they could lay their hands on. And as far off as they could perceive him, they ran thronging upon the back of one another in all haste towards him, to unload him of his money and untruss his portmantles. Then cried he out unto them, My masters, I am a poor devil, I desire you to spare me. I have yet 1 crown left. Come, we must drink it, for it is aurum potabile, and this horse here shall be sold to pay my welcome. Afterwards take me for one of your own, for never yet was there any man that knew better how to take, lard, roast, and dress, yea, by G, to tear asunder and devour a hen, than I that am here. And for my proficient I drink to all good fellows. With that he unscrewed his borracho, which was a great Dutch leathern bottle, and without putting in his nose drank very honestly. The marrowful rogues looked upon him, opening their throats a foot wide, and putting out their tongues like greyhounds, in hopes to drink after him. But Captain Tripet, in the very nick of that their expectation, came running to him to see who it was. To him Gymnast offered his bottle, saying, Hold, Captain, drink boldly and spare not. I have been thy taster, it is wine of la fée Monjo. What? Said Tripet, this fellow jibes and flouts us. Who art thou? Said Tripet. I am, said Gymnast, a poor devil pover diable. Ha, said Tripet, seeing thou art a poor devil, it is reason that thou shouldst be permitted to go whithersoever thou wilt, for all poor devils pass everywhere without toll or tax. But it is not the custom of poor devils to be so well mounted. Therefore, Sir Devil, come down and let me have your horse, and if he do not carry me well, you, Master Devil, must do it. For I love a life that such a devil as you should carry me away. Chapter 1.35 How Gymnast very souply and cunningly killed Captain Tripet, and others of Picrochole's men. When they heard these words, some amongst them began to be afraid, and blessed themselves with both hands, thinking indeed that he had been a devil disguised, insomuch that one of them, named Good John, captain of the trained bands of the country bumpkins, took his psalter out of his codpiece, and cried out aloud, Hagios ho theos. If thou be of God, speak. If thou be of the other spirit, avoid hence and get thee going. Yet he went not away. Which words being heard by all the soldiers that were there, divers of them being a little inwardly terrified, departed from the place. All this did Gymnast very well remark and consider, and therefore making as if he would have alighted from off his horse, as he was poising himself on the mounting side, he most nimbly, with his short sword by his thigh, shifting his foot in the stirrup, performed the stirrup leather feat, whereby, after the inclining of his body downwards, he forthwith launched himself aloft in the air, and placed both his feet together on the saddle, standing upright with his back turned towards the horse's head. Now, said he, my case goes backward. Then suddenly in the same very posture wherein he was, he fetched a gambol upon one foot, and turning to the left hand, failed not to carry his body perfectly round, just into its former stance, without missing one jot. Ha, said Tripet, I will not do that at this time, and not without cause. Well, said Gymnast, I have failed, I will undo this leap. Then with a marvelous strength and agility, turning towards the right hand, he fetched another frisking gambol as before, which done, he set his right hand thumb upon the hind bow of the saddle, raised himself up, and sprung in the air, poising and upholding his whole body upon the muscle and nerve of the said thumb, and so turned and whirled himself about 3 times. At the fourth, reversing his body, and overturning it upside down and foreside back, without touching anything, he brought himself betwixt the horse's 2 ears, springing with all his body into the air, upon the thumb of his left hand, and in that posture, turning like a windmill, did most actively do that trick which is called the miller's pass. After this, clapping his right hand flat upon the middle of the saddle, he gave himself such a jerking swing that he thereby seated himself upon the crupper, after the manner of gentlewomen sitting on horseback. This done, he easily passed his right leg over the saddle, and placed himself like one that rides in croup. But said he, it were better for me to get into the saddle. Then putting the thumbs of both hands upon the crupper before him, and thereupon leaning himself, as upon the only supporters of his body, he incontinently turned heels over head in the air, and straight found himself betwixt the bow of the saddle in a good settlement. Then with a somersault springing into the air again, he fell to stand with both his feet close together upon the saddle, and there made above 100 frisks, turns, and demipomades, with his arms held out across, and in so doing cried out aloud, I rage, devils, I am stark mad, devils, I am mad. Hold me, devils, hold me, hold, devils, hold, hold. Whilst he was thus vaulting, the rogues in great astonishment said to one another, by cock's death, he is a goblin or a devil thus disguised. ab host maligno libera nos domine, and ran away in a full flight, as if they had been rooted, looking now and then behind them, like a dog that carrieth away a goose swing in his mouth. Then Gymnast, spying his advantage alighted from his horse, drew his sword, and laid on great blows upon the thickset and highest crested among them, and overthrew them in great heaps, hurt, wounded, and bruised, being resisted by nobody, they thinking he had been a starved devil, as well in regard of his wonderful feats in vaulting, which they had seen, as for the talk Tripet had with him, calling him poor devil. Only Tripet would have traitorously cleft his head with his horseman's sword or lance-knight falchion, but he was well armed, and felt nothing of the blow but the weight of the stroke. Whereupon, turning suddenly about, he gave Tripet a home thrust, and upon the back of that, whilst he was about to ward his head from a slash, he ran him in at the breast with a hit, which at once cut his stomach, the fifth gut called the colon, and the half of his liver, wherewith he fell to the ground, and in falling gushed forth above 4 pottles of pottage, and his soul mingled with the pottage. This done, Gymnast withdrew himself, very wisely considering that a case of great adventure and hazard should not be pursued unto its utmost period, and that it becomes all cavaliers modestly to use their good fortune, without troubling or stretching it too far. Wherefore, getting to horse, he gave him the spur, taking the right way unto Vaughan and prelinguand with him. Chapter 1.36 How Gargantua demolished the castle at the ford of Vede, and how they passed the ford. As soon as he came, he related the estate and condition wherein they had found the enemy, and the stratagem which he alone had used against all their multitude, affirming that they were but rascally rogues, plunderers, thieves, and robbers, ignorant of all military discipline, and that they might boldly set forward unto the field, it being an easy matter to fell and strike them down like beasts. Then Gargantua mounted his great mare, accompanied as we have said before, and finding in his way a high and great tree, which commonly was called by the name of St. Martin's tree, because heretofore St. Martin planted a pilgrim's staff there, which in tract of time grew to that height and greatness, said, "This is that which I lacked. This tree shall serve me both for a staff and lance." With that he pulled it up easily, plucked off the boughs, and trimmed it at his pleasure. In the meantime his mare pissed to ease her belly, but it was in such abundance that it did overflow the country 7 leagues, and all the piss of that urinal flood ran glib away towards the ford of Vede, wherewith the water was so swollen that all the forces the enemy had there were with great horror drowned, except some who had taken the way on the left hand towards the hills. Gargantua, being come to the place of the wood of Vede, was informed by Eudaemon that there was some remainder of the enemy within the castle, which to know, Gargantua cried out as loud as he was able, "Are you there, or are you not there? If you be there no more, and if you are not there, I have no more to say." But a ruffian gunner, whose charge was to attend the portcullis over the gate, let fly a cannonball at him, and hit him with that shot most furiously on the right temple of his head, yet did him no more hurt than if he had but cast a prune or kernel of a wine grape at him. "What is this?" said Gargantua, "do you throw at us grape kernels here? The vintage shall cost you dear," thinking indeed that the bullet had been the kernel of a grape or raisin kernel. Those who were within the castle, being till then busy at the pillage, when they heard this noise ran to the towers and fortresses, from whence they shot at him above 9,025 falcon shot and arquebusades, aiming all at his head, and so thick did they shoot at him that he cried out, "Panocrates, my friend, these flies here are like to put out mine eyes. Give me a branch of those willow trees to drive them away," thinking that the bullets and stones shot out of the great ordnance had been but dunflies. Panocrates looked and saw that there were no other flies, but great shot which they had shot from the castle. Then was it that he rushed with his great tree against the castle, and with mighty blows overthrew both towers and fortresses, and laid all level with the ground, by which means all that were within were slain and broken in pieces. Going from thence, they came to the bridge at the mill, where they found all the ford covered with dead bodies, so thick that they had choked up the mill and stopped the current of its water, and these were those that were destroyed in the urinal deluge of the mare. There they were at a stand, consulting how they might pass without hindrance by these dead carcasses. But Gymnast said, "If the devils have passed there, I will pass well enough." "The devils have passed there," said Eudaemon, "to carry away the damned souls." By Saint Trainin. Said Ponocrates, then by necessary consequence he shall pass there. Yes, yes, said gymnasts, or I shall stick in the way. Then setting spurs to his horse, he passed through freely, his horse not fearing nor being anything affrighted at the sight of the dead bodies. For he had accustomed him, according to the doctrine of Aelian, not to fear armor, nor the carcasses of dead men. And that not by killing men as Diomedes did the Thracians, or as Ulysses did in throwing the corpses of his enemies at his horse's feet, as Homer saith, but by putting a jack-o'-lent amongst his hay, and making him go over it ordinarily when he gave him his oats. The other three followed him very close, except Eudaemon only, whose horse's foreright or far forefoot sank up to the knee in the paunch of a great fat chough who lay there upon his back drowned, and could not get it out. There was he pestered, until Gargantua, with the end of his staff, thrust down the rest of the villain's tripes into the water, whilst the horse pulled out his foot. And, which is a wonderful thing in hippiatry, the said horse was thoroughly cured of a ringbone which he had in that foot by this touch of the burst guts of that great looby. Chapter 1.37. How Gargantua, in combing his head, made the great cannonballs fall out of his hair. Being come out of the river of Vede, they came very shortly after to Grangasier's castle, who waited for them with great longing. At their coming they were entertained with many congees, and cherished with embraces. Never was seen a more joyful company, for supplementum supplementi chronicorum saith that Gargamel died there with joy. For my part, truly I cannot tell, neither do I care very much for her, nor for anybody else. The truth was that Gargantua, in shifting his clothes, and combing his head with a comb, which was 900 foot long of the Jewish cane measure, and whereof the teeth were great tusks of elephants, whole and entire, he made fall at every rake above 7 balls of bullets, at a dozen the ball, that stuck in his hair at the raising of the castle of the wood of Vede. Which his father Grangasier seeing, thought they had been lice, and said unto him, What, my dear son, hast thou brought us this far some short-winged hawks of the college of Montague? I did not mean that thou shouldst reside there. Then answered Ponocrates, my sovereign lord, think not that I have placed him in that lousy college which they call Montague. I had rather have put him amongst the grave diggers of Sanct Innocent, so enormous is the cruelty and villainy that I have known there. For the galley slaves are far better used amongst the Moors and Tartars, the murderers in the criminal dungeons, yea, the very dogs in your house, than are the poor wretched students in the aforesaid college. And if I were king of Paris, the devil take me if I would not set it on fire, and burn both principal and regents, for suffering this inhumanity to be exercised before their eyes. Then, taking up one of these bullets, he said, These are cannon shot, which your son Gargantua hath lately received by the treachery of your enemies, as he was passing before the wood of Vede. But they have been so rewarded, that they are all destroyed in the ruin of the castle, as were the Philistines by the policy of Samson, and those whom the tower of Siloam slew, as it is written in the 13th of Luke. My opinion is, that we pursue them whilst the luck is on our side. For occasion hath all her hair on her forehead. When she is past, you may not recall her she hath no tuft whereby you can lay hold on her, for she is bald in the hind part of her head, and never returneth again. Truly, said Grangasier, it shall not be at this time, for I will make you a feast this night, and bid you welcome. This said, they made ready supper, and of extraordinary besides his daily fare were roasted 16 oxen, 3 heifers, 32 calves, 63 fat kids, fourscore and 15 wethers, 300 farrow pigs or sheets soused in sweet wine or must, 11 score partridges, 700 snipes and woodcocks, 400 Loudon and Cornwall capons, 6,000 pullets, and as many pigeons, 600 crammed hens, 1,400 leverets, or young hares and rabbits, 303 buzzards, and 1,700 cockerels. For venison, they could not so suddenly come by it, only 11 wild boars, which the abbot of Turpinay sent, and 18 fallow deer which the lord of Gramont bestowed, together with 7 score pheasants, which were sent by the lord of Essars, and some dozens of queests, cowshats, ringdoves, and woodculvers. Riverfowl, teals and odiols, bitterns, courts, plovers, francolins, briganders, tyrasons, young lapwings, tame ducks, shovelers, woodlanders, herons, moorhens, creels, storks, campeteers, oranges, flamins, which are phenicopters or crimson-winged seafowls, terragols, turkeys, arbins, coots, solan geese, curlews, termagants, and water wagtails, with a great deal of cream, curds, and fresh cheese, and store of soup, pottages, and brewies with great variety. Without doubt there was meat enough, and it was handsomely dressed by snapsaws, hotchpot, and braverjuice, Grangasier's cooks. Jenkin, Trudgepace, and Klinglas were very careful to fill them drink. Chapter 1.38 How Gargantua did eat up 6 pilgrims in a salad. The story requireth that we relate that which happened unto 6 pilgrims who came from Sebastian near to Nantes, and who for shelter that night, being afraid of the enemy, had hid themselves in the garden upon the chichling peas, among the cabbages and lettuces. Gargantua, finding himself somewhat dry, asked whether they could get any lettuce to make him a salad, and hearing that there were the greatest and fairest in the country, for they were as great as plum trees or as walnut trees, he would go thither himself, and brought thence in his hand what he thought good, and withal carried away the 6 pilgrims, who were in so great fear that they did not dare to speak nor cough. Washing them, therefore, first at the fountain, the pilgrims said one to another softly, "What shall we do? We are almost drowned here amongst these lettuce, shall we speak? But if we speak, he will kill us for spies." And as they were thus deliberating what to do, Gargantua put them with the lettuce into a platter of the house, as large as the huge tun of the White Friars of the Cistercian order, which done, with oil, vinegar, and salt, he ate them up, to refresh himself a little before supper, and had already swallowed up 5 of the pilgrims, the 6th being in the platter, totally hid under a lettuce, except his bourdon or staff that appeared, and nothing else. Which Grangasier seeing, said to Gargantua, "I think that is the horn of a shell snail, do not eat it." "Why not?" said Gargantua, "they are good all this month." Which he no sooner said, but drawing up the staff, and therewith taking up the pilgrim, he ate him very well, then drank a terrible draught of excellent white wine. The pilgrims, thus devoured, made shift to save themselves as well as they could, by withdrawing their bodies out of the reach of the grinders of his teeth, but could not escape from thinking they had been put in the lowest dungeon of a prison. And when Gargantua whiffed the great draught, they thought to have been drowned in his mouth, and the flood of wine had almost carried them away into the gulf of his stomach. Nevertheless, skipping with their bourdons, as St. Michael's palmers used to do, they sheltered themselves from the danger of that inundation under the banks of his teeth. But one of them, by chance, groping or sounding the country with his staff, to try whether they were in safety or no, struck hard against the cleft of a hollow tooth, and hit the mandibulary sinew or nerve of the jaw, which put Gargantua to very great pain, so that he began to cry for the rage that he felt. To ease himself, therefore, of his smarting ache, he called for his toothpicker, and rubbing towards a young walnut tree, where they lay skulking, unnestled you, my gentlemen pilgrims. For he caught one by the legs, another by the scrip, another by the pocket, another by the scarf, another by the band of the breeches, and the poor fellow that had hurt him with the bourdon, him he hooked to him by the codpiece, which snatch nevertheless did him a great deal of good, for it pierced unto him a pocky botch he had in the groin, which grievously tormented him ever since they were past Ancenis. The pilgrims, thus dislodged, ran away athwart the plain a pretty fast pace, and the pain ceased, even just at the time when by Eudaemon he was called to supper, for all was ready. "I will go then," said he, "and piss away my misfortune," which he did do in such a copious measure, that the urine taking away the feet from the pilgrims, they were carried along with the stream unto the bank of a tuft of trees. Upon which, as soon as they had taken footing, and that for their self-preservation they had run a little out of the road, they on a sudden fell all 6, except Fornaler, into a trap that had been made to take wolves by a train, out of which, nevertheless, they escaped by the industry of the said Fornaler, who broke all the snares and ropes. Being gone from thence, they lay all the rest of that night in a lodge near unto Coudray, where they were comforted in their miseries by the gracious words of one of their company, called Sweerdigo, who showed them that this adventure had been foretold by the prophet David, Psalm. Quam exsurgerant homines in nos, forte vivos degludescent nos, when we were eaten in the salad, with salt, oil, and vinegar. Quam irasceretur furor aerum in nos, for sit in aqua absorbuus et nos, when he drank the great draught. torrentum pertransivit anima nostra, when the stream of his water carried us to the thicket. For sit in pertransisset anima nostra aquam intolerabilum, that is, the water of his urine, the flood whereof, cutting our way, took our feet from us. Benedictus Dominus, qui non dedit nos, in captionem dentibus aerum. Anima nostra sicut, passer erepta est de laqueo venantium, when we fell in the trap. Lacus contradis est, by Forneller, et nos liberati sumus. Adjutorium nostrum and c. Chapter 1.39. How the monk was feasted by Gargantua, and of the jovial discourse they had at supper. When Gargantua was set down at table, after all of them had somewhat stayed their stomachs by a snatch or two of the first bits eaten heartily, Grangousier began to relate the source and cause of the war raised between him and Picrochole, and came to tell how Friar John of the Funnels had triumphed at the defense of the close of the abbey, and extolled him for his valor above Camillus, Scipio, Pompey, Caesar, and Themistocles. Then Gargantua desired that he might be presently sent for, to the end that with him they might consult of what was to be done. Whereupon, by a joint consent, his steward went for him, and brought him along merrily with his staff of the cross, upon Grangousier's mule. When he was come, 1,000 huggings, 1,000 embracements, 1,000 good days were given. Ha, Friar John, my friend Friar John, my brave cousin Friar John from the devil. Let me clip thee, my heart, about the neck, to me an armful. I must grip thee, my ballock, till thy back crack with it. Come, my cod, let me call thee till I kill thee. And Friar John, the gladdest man in the world, never was man made welcomer, never was any more courteously and graciously received than Friar John. Come, come, said Gargantua, a stool here close by me at this end. I am content, said the monk, seeing you will have it so. Some water, page, fill, my boy, fill, it is to refresh my liver. Give me some, child, to gargle my throat withal. Deposita cappa, said Gymnast, let us pull off this frock. Ho, by G, gentlemen, said the monk, there is a chapter in Statutes Ordines which opposeth my laying of it down. Pish, said Gymnast, a fig for your chapter. This frock breaks both your shoulders, put it off. My friend, said the monk, let me alone with it, for by G, I'll drink the better that it is on. It makes all my body jocund. If I should lay it aside, the waggish pages would cut to themselves garters out of it, as I was once served at Coulain's. And which is worse, I shall lose my appetite. But if in this habit I sit down at table, I will drink, by G, both to thee and to thy horse, and so courage, frolic, God save the company. I have already supped, yet will eat never a whit the less for that. For I have a paved stomach, as hollow as a butt of Malvoisie or Saint Benedictus, boot butt, and always open like a lawyer's pouch. Of all fishes, but the tench take the wing of a partridge, or the thigh of a nun. Doth not he die like a good fellow that dies with a stiff catso? Our prior loves exceedingly the white of a capon. In that, said Gymnast, he doth not resemble the foxes, for of the capons, hens, and pullets which they carry away they never eat the white. Why? Said the monk. Because, said Gymnast, they have no cooks to dress them, and if they be not competently made ready, they remain red and not white, the redness of meats being a token that they have not got enough of the fire, whether by boiling, roasting, or otherwise, except the shrimps, lobsters, crabs, and crayfishes, which are cardinalized with boiling. By God's feast gazers, said the monk, the porter of our abbey then hath not his head well boiled, for his eyes are as red as a mazer made of an alder tree. The thigh of this leveret is good for those that have the gout. To the purpose of the truel, what is the reason that the thighs of a gentlewoman are always fresh and cool? This problem, said Gargantua, is neither in Aristotle, in Alexander Aphrodisius, nor in Plutarch. There are 3 causes, said the monk, by which that place is naturally refreshed. Primo, because the water runs all along by it. Secundo, because it is a shady place, obscure and dark, upon which the sun never shines. And thirdly, because it is continually flabbled, blown upon, and aired by the north winds of the whole arstic, the fan of the smock, and flip-flap of the codpiece. And lusty, my lads. Some bousing liquor, page. So, crack, track, track. Oh, how good is God, that gives us of this excellent juice. Call him to witness, If I had been in the time of Jesus Christ, I would have kept him from being taken by the Jews in the Garden of Olivet. And the devil fail me, if I should have failed to cut off the hams of these gentlemen apostles who ran away so basely after they had well supped, and left their good master in the lurch. I hate that man worse than poison that offers to run away when he should fight and lay stoutly about him. Oh, that I were but king of France for 80 or 100 years. By G, I should whip like curtail dogs these runaways of Pavia. A plague take them. Why did they not choose rather to die there than to leave their good prince in that pinch and necessity? Is it not better and more honorable to perish in fighting valiantly than to live in disgrace by a cowardly running away? We are like to eat no great store of goslings this year. Therefore, friend, reach me some of that roasted pig there. Diavolo, is there no more must? No more sweet wine. German avat radix Jesse. G renaimavi G mors de soif. I renounce my life, I rage for thirst. This wine is none of the worst. What wine drink you at Paris? Give myself to the devil, if I did not once keep open house at Paris for all comers 6 months together. Do you know Friar Claude of the High Kilderkins? Oh, the good fellow that he is. But I do not know what fly hath stung him of late, he is become so hard a student. For my part, I study not at all. In our abbey, we never study for fear of the mumps, which disease in horses is called the morning and the chine. Our late abbot was wont to say that it is a monstrous thing to see a learned monk. By G, master, my friend, magis magnos clericos non sunt magis magnos sapiens. You never saw so many hares as there are this year. I could not anywhere come by a goshawk nor tassel of falcon. My Lord Belloniere promised me a lanner, but he wrote to me not long ago that he was become Percy. The partridges will so multiply henceforth that they will go near to eat up our ears. I take no delight in the stalking horse, for I catch such cold that I am like to founder myself at that sport. If I do not run, toil, travel and trot about, I am not well at ease. True it is that in leaping over the hedges and bushes my frock leaves, always some of its wool behind it. I have recovered a dainty greyhound. I give him to the devil, if he suffer a hare to escape him. A groom was leading him to my Lord Huntlittle, and I robbed him of him. Did I ill? No, Friar John, said Gymnast, no, by all the devils that are no. So, said the monk, do I attest these same devils so long as they last, or rather, virtue of G. What could that gouty limpard have done with so fine a dog? By the body of G, he is better pleased when one presents him with a good yoke of oxen. How now, said Ponocrates, you swear, Friar John? It is only, said the monk, but to grace and adorn my speech. They are colors of a Ciceronian rhetoric. Chapter 1.4. Why monks are the outcasts of the world, and wherefore some have bigger noses than others. By the faith of a Christian, said Eudaemon, I do wonderfully dote and enter in a great ecstasy when I consider the honesty and good fellowship of this monk, for he makes us here all merry. How is it, then, that they exclude the monks from all good companies, calling them feast troublers, mares of mirth, and disturbers of all civil conversation, as the bees drive away the drones from their hives? Ignavum fucos pecus, said Maro, a praecipibus arsent. Hereunto, answered Gargantua, there is nothing so true as that the frock and cowl draw unto itself the opprobries, injuries, and maledictions of the world, just as the wind called Cetias attracts the clouds. The peremptory reason is, because they eat the ordure and excrements of the world, that is to say, the sins of the people, and, like dung-chewers and excrementitious eaters, they are cast into the privies and cessative places, that is, the convents and abbeys separated from political conversation, as the jakes and retreats of a house are. But if you conceive how an ape in a family is always mocked and provokingly incensed, you shall easily apprehend how monks are shunned of all men, both young and old. The ape keeps not the house as a dog doth, he draws not in the plough as the ox, he yields neither milk nor wool as the sheep, he carrieth no burden as a horse doth. That which he doth is only to conceit, spoil, and defile all, which is the cause wherefore he hath of all men mocks, frumperies, and bastinadoes. After the same manner a monkai mean those lither, idle, lazy monks doth not labor and work, as do the peasant and artificer. Doth not ward and defend the country, as doth the man of war. Cureth not the sick and diseased, as the physician doth neither preach nor teach, as do the evangelical doctors and schoolmasters, doth not import commodities and things necessary for the commonwealth, as the merchant doth. Therefore is it that by and of all men they are hooted at, hated, and abhorred. Yea, but said Grangacier, they pray to God for us. Nothing less, answered Gargantua. True it is, that with a tingle-tangle jangling of bells, they trouble and disquiet all their neighbors about them. Right, said the monk, a mass, a matin, a vesper well rung are half said. They mumble out great store of legends and psalms, by them not at all understood. They say many paternosters interlarded with Ave Marys, without thinking upon or apprehending the meaning of what it is they say, which truly I call mocking of God, and not prayers. But so help them God, as they pray for us, and not for being afraid to lose their victuals, their manchots, and good fat pottage. All true Christians, of all estates and conditions, in all places and at all times, send up their prayers to God, and the mediator prayeth and intercedeth for them, and God is gracious to them. Now such a one is our good Friar John, therefore every man desireth to have him in his company. He is no bigot or hypocrite. He is not torn and divided betwixt reality and appearance, no wretch of a rugged and peevish disposition, but honest, jovial, resolute, and a good fellow. He travels, he labors, he defends the oppressed, comforts the afflicted, helps the needy, and keeps the close of the abbey. Nay, said the monk, I do a great deal more than that. For whilst we are in dispatching our matins and anniversaries in the choir, I make withal some crossbow strings, polish glass bottles and bolts, I twist lines, and weave purse nets wherein to catch conies. I am never idle. But now hither come, some drink here. Bring the fruit. These chestnuts are of the wood of Estrox, and with good new wine are able to make you a fine cracker and composer of bumsonnets. You are not as yet, it seems, well moistened in this house with the sweet wine and must. By G, I drink to all men freely, and at all fords, like a proctor or promoter's horse. Friar John, said Gymnast, take away the snot that hangs at your nose. Ha, ha, said the monk, am not I in danger of drowning, seeing I am in water even to the nose? No, quare. Quia, though some water come out from thence, there never goes in any, for it is well antidoted with pot-proof armor and syrup of the vine leaf. Oh, my friend, he that hath winter boots made of such leather may boldly fish for oysters, for they will never take water. What is the cause, said Gargantua, that Friar John hath such a fair nose? Because, said Grangacier, that God would have it so, who frameth us in such form, and for such end as is most agreeable with his divine will, even as a potter fashioneth his vessels. Because, said Ponocrates, he came with the first to the fair of noses, and therefore made choice of the fairest and the greatest. Pish, said the monk, that is not the reason of it, but, according to the true monastical philosophy, it is because my nurse had soft teats, by virtue whereof, whilst she gave me suck, my nose did sink in as in so much butter. The hard breasts of nurses make children short-nosed. But hey, gay, ad formam nasi cognoscitur ad te levavi. I never eat any confections, page, whilst I am at the bibbery. Item, bring me rather some toasts. Chapter 1.41. How the monk made Gargantua sleep, and of his hours and breviaries. Supper being ended, they consulted of the business in hand, and concluded that about midnight they should fall unawares upon the enemy, to know what manner of watch and ward they kept, and that in the meanwhile they should take a little rest the better to refresh themselves. But Gargantua could not sleep by any means, on which side soever he turned himself. Whereupon the monk said to him, I never sleep soundly, but when I am at sermon or prayers. Let us therefore begin, you and I, the 7 penitential psalms, to try whether you shall not quickly fall asleep. The conceit pleased Gargantua very well, and, beginning the first of these psalms, as soon as they came to the words Bidi quorum they fell asleep, both the one and the other. But the monk, for his being formerly accustomed to the hour of claustral matins, failed not to awake a little before midnight, and being up himself, awaked all the rest, in singing aloud, and with a full clear voice, the song. Awake, O Rhiannian, ho, awake. Awake, O Rhiannian, ho. Get up, you no more sleep must take, get up, for we must go. When they were all roused and up, he said, "My masters, it is a usual saying that we begin matins with coughing and supper with drinking. Let us now, in doing clean contrarily, begin our matins with drinking, and at night before supper we shall cough as hard as we can." What said Gargantua, to drink so soon after sleep? This is not to live according to the diet and prescript rule of the physicians, for you ought first to scour and cleanse your stomach of all its superfluities and excrements. "Oh, well physicked," said the monk. "100 devils leap into my body, if there be not more old drunkards than old physicians. I have made this paction and covenant with my appetite, that it always lieth down and goes to bed with myself, for to that I every day give very good order. Then the next morning it also riseth with me and gets up when I am awake. Mind your charges, gentlemen, or tend your cures as much as you will. I will get me to my drawer, in terms of falconry, my tiring." "What drawer or tiring do you mean?" said Gargantua. "My breviary," said the monk, "for just as the falconers, before they feed their hawks, do make them draw at a hen's leg to purge their brains of phlegm and sharpen them to a good appetite, so, by taking this merry little breviary in the morning, I scour all my lungs and am presently ready to drink." "After what manner," said Gargantua, "do you say these fair hours and prayers of yours?" "After the manner of Whitfield Fessicamp and corruptly Feckin," said the monk, "by 3 psalms and 3 lessons, or nothing at all, he that will. I never tie myself to hours, prayers, and sacraments, for they are made for the man and not the man for them. Therefore is it that I make my prayers in fashion of stirrup-leathers. I shorten or lengthen them when I think good. Brevis oratio penetrat calos, et longa petatio evacuat siphos." Where is that written? "By my faith," said Ponocrates, "I cannot tell my pillicock, but thou art more worth than gold." "Therein," said the monk, "I am like you, but venite apotmus." Then made they ready store of carbonados, or rashers on the coals, and good fat soups, or brewies with sippets, and the monk drank what he pleased. Some kept him company, and the rest did forbear, for their stomachs were not as yet opened. Afterwards every man began to arm, and befit himself for the field. And they armed the monk against his will, for he desired no other armor for back and breast but his frock, nor any other weapon in his hand but the staff of the cross. Yet at their pleasure was he completely armed cap a pie, and mounted upon one of the best horses in the kingdom, with a good slashing shable by his side, together with Gargantua, Ponocrates, Gymnast, Eudaemon, and 25 more of the most resolute and adventurous of Grangasier's house, all armed at proof with their lances in their hands, mounted like St. George, and every one of them having an arquebusier behind him. Chapter 1.42. How the monk encouraged his fellow champions, and how he hanged upon a tree. Thus went out those valiant champions on their adventure, in full resolution to know what enterprise they should undertake, and what to take heed of and look well to in the day of the great and horrible battle. And the monk encouraged them, saying, "My children, do not fear nor doubt, I will conduct you safely. God and Sanct Benedict be with us. If I had strength answerable to my courage by's death, I would plume them for you like ducks. I fear nothing but the great ordinance, yet I know of a charm by way of prayer, which the subsexton of our abbey taught me, that will preserve a man from the violence of guns and all manner of fire weapons and engines, but it will do me no good, because I do not believe it. Nevertheless, I hope my staff of the cross shall this day play devilish pranks amongst them. By G, whoever of our party shall offer to play the duck and shrink when blows are a-dealing, I give myself to the devil, if I do not make a monk of him in my stead and hamper him within my frock, which is a sovereign cure against cowardice. Did you never hear of my lord Mules his greyhound, which was not worth a straw in the fields? He put a frock about his neck. By the body of G, there was neither hare nor fox that could escape him, and, which is more, he lined all the bitches in the country, though before that he was feeble-reined and ex frigides et maleficiatis. The monk uttering these words in choler, as he passed under a walnut tree, in his way towards the caussee, he broached the visor of his helmet on the stump of a great branch of the said tree. Nevertheless, he set his spurs so fiercely to the horse, who was full of mettle and quick on the spur, that he bounded forwards, and the monk going about to ungrapple his visor, let go his hold of the bridle, and so hanged by his hand upon the bough, whilst his horse stole away from under him. By this means was the monk left hanging on the walnut tree, and crying for help, murder, murder, swearing also that he was betrayed. Eudaemon perceived him first, and calling Gargantua said, Sir, come and see Absalom hanging. Gargantua, being come, considered the countenance of the monk, and in what posture he hanged. Wherefore he said to Eudaemon, You were mistaken in comparing him to Absalom. For Absalom hung by his hair, but this shaveling monk hangeth by the ears. Help me, said the monk, in the devil's name. Is this a time for you to prate? You seem to me to be like the decretalist preachers, who say that whosoever shall see his neighbor in the danger of death, ought, upon pain of trisulk excommunication, rather choose to admonish him to make his confession to a priest, and put his conscience in the state of peace, than otherwise to help and relieve him. And therefore, when I shall see them fallen into a river, and ready to be drowned, I shall make them a fair long sermon de contemptu mundi, et fuga seculi, and when they are stark dead, shall then go to their aid and succor in fishing after them. Be quiet, said Gymnast, and stir not my minion. I am now coming to unhang thee, and to set thee at freedom, for thou art a pretty little gentle monachus. Monachus in claustro non vale oviduo, sed quando est extra, bene vale trigenta. I have seen above 500 hanged, but I never saw any have a better countenance in his dangling and pendulatory swagging. Truly, if I had so good a one, I would willingly hang thus all my lifetime. What, said the monk, have you almost done preaching? Help me, in the name of God, seeing you will not in the name of the other spirit, or, by the habit which I wear, you shall repent it, tempor et loco praelibadis. Then Gymnast alighted from his horse, and, climbing up the walnut tree, lifted up the monk with one hand by the gussets of his armor under the armpits, and with the other undid his visor from the stump of the broken branch. Which done, he let him fall to the ground and himself after. As soon as the monk was down, he put off all his armor, and threw away one piece after another about the field, and taking to him again his staff of the cross, remounted up to his horse, which Eudaemon had caught in his running away. Then went they on merrily, riding along on the highway. Chapter 1.43 How the scouts and foreparty of Picrocole were met with by Gargantua, and how the monk slew Captain Drawforth Tyrevant, and then was taken prisoner by his enemies. Picrocole, at the relation of those who had escaped out of the broil and defeat wherein Tripet was untriped, grew very angry that the devils should have so run upon his men, and held all that night a council of war, at which Rashcalf and Touchfaucet, Hastevo, Tauquedillin, concluded his power to be such that he was able to defeat all the devils of hell if they should come to jostle with his forces. This Picrocole did not fully believe, though he doubted not much of it. Therefore sent he under the command and conduct of the Count Drawforth, for discovering of the country, the number of 1,600 horsemen, all well mounted upon light horses for skirmish and thoroughly besprinkled with holy water. And everyone for their field mark or cognizance had the sign of a star in his scarf, to serve at all adventures in case they should happen to encounter with devils, that by the virtue, as well of that Gregorian water as of the stars which they wore, they might make them disappear and evanish. In this equipage they made an excursion upon the country till they came near to the Vaugan, which is the valley of Guyon, and to the Spittle, but could never find anybody to speak unto. Whereupon they returned a little back, and took occasion to pass above the aforesaid hospital to try what intelligence they could come by in those parts. In which resolution riding on, and by chance in a pastoral lodge or shepherd's cottage near to Cowdray hitting upon the 5 pilgrims, they carried them way bound and manacled, as if they had been spies, for all the exclamations, adjurations, and requests that they could make. Being come down from thence towards Seville, they were heard by Gargantua, who said then unto those that were with him, comrades and fellow soldiers, We have here met with an encounter, and they are 10 times in number more than we. Shall we charge them or no? What a devil, said the monk, shall we do else? Do you esteem men by their number rather than by their valor and prowess? With this he cried out, Charge, devils, charge. Which when the enemies heard, they thought certainly that they had been very devils, and therefore even then began all of them to run away as hard as they could drive, Drawforth only excepted, who immediately settled his lance on its rest, and therewith hit the monk with all his force on the very middle of his breast, but coming against his horrific frock, the point of the iron being with the blow either broke off or blunted. It was in matter of execution, as if you had struck against an anvil with a little wax candle. Then did the monk with his staff of the cross give him such a sturdy thump, and were it betwixt his neck and shoulders upon the acromion bone, that he made him lose both sense and motion and fall down stone dead at his horse's feet. And seeing the sign of the star which he wore scarfwise, he said unto Gargantua, These men are but priests, which is but the beginning of a monk. By St. John, I am a perfect monk, I will kill them to you like flies. Then ran he after them at a swift and full gallop till he overtook the rear, and felled them down like tree leaves, striking athwart and alongst and every way. Gymnast presently asked Gargantua if they should pursue them. To whom Gargantua answered, By no means. For according to right military discipline, you must never drive your enemy unto despair, for that such a strait doth multiply his force and increase his courage, which was before broken and cast down. Neither is there any better help or outrage of relief for men that are amazed, out of heart, twalled, and spent, than to hope for no favor at all. How many victories have been taken out of the hands of the victors by the vanquished, when they would not rest satisfied with reason, but attempt to put all to the sword, and totally to destroy their enemies, without leaving so much as one to carry home news of the defeat of his fellows. Open, therefore, unto your enemies all the gates and ways, and make to them a bridge of silver rather than fail, that you may be rid of them. Yea, but said Gymnast, they have the monk. Have they the monk? Said Gargantua. Upon mine honor, then, it will prove to their cost. But to prevent all dangers, let us not yet retreat, but halt here quietly as in an ambush, for I think I do already understand the policy and judgment of our enemies. They are truly more directed by chance and mere fortune than by good advice and counsel. In the meanwhile, whilst these made a stop under the walnut trees, the monk pursued on the chase, charging all he overtook, and giving quarter to none, until he met with a trooper who carried behind him one of the poor pilgrims, and there would have rifled him. The pilgrim, in hope of relief at the sight of the monk, cried out, Ha, my lord prior, my good friend, my lord prior, save me, I beseech you, save me. Which words being heard by those that rode in the van, they instantly faced about, and seeing there was nobody but the monk that made this great havoc and slaughter among them, they loaded him with blows as thick as they used to do an ass with wood. But of all this he felt nothing, especially when they struck upon his frock, his skin was so hard. Then they committed him to two of the marshal's men to keep, and, looking about, saw nobody coming against them, whereupon they thought that Gargantua and his party were fled. Then was it that they rode as hard as they could towards the walnut trees to meet with them, and left the monk there all alone, with his two foresaid men to guard him. Gargantua heard the noise and neighing of the horses, and said to his men, Comrades, I hear the track and beating of the enemy's horse feet, and withal perceive that some of them come in a troop and full body against us. Let us rally and close here, then set forward in order, and by this means we shall be able to receive their charge to their loss and our honor. Chapter 1.44 How the monk rid himself of his keepers, and how Picrochole's forlorn hope was defeated. The monk, seeing them break off thus without order, conjectured that they were to set upon Gargantua and those that were with him, and was wonderfully grieved that he could not succor them. Then considered he the countenance of the two keepers in whose custody he was, who would have willingly run after the troops to get some booty and plunder, and were always looking towards the valley unto which they were going. Farther he syllogized, saying, These men are but badly skilled in matters of war, for they have not required my parole, neither have they taken my sword from me. Suddenly hereafter he drew his brackmard or horseman's sword, wherewith he gave the keeper which held him on the right side such a sound slash that he cut clean through the jugulary veins and the sphagetid or transparent arteries of the neck, with the forepart of the throat called the gargaran, even unto the two adens, which are throat kernels. And redoubling the blow, he opened the spinal marrow betwixt the second and third vertebrae. There fell down that keeper stark dead to the ground. Then the monk, reining his horse to the left, ran upon the other, who, seeing his fellow dead, and the monk to have the advantage of him, cried with a loud voice, Ha, my lord prior, quarter. I yield, my lord prior, "Quarter, quarter, my good friend, my lord prior." And the monk cried likewise, "My lord posterior, my friend, my lord posterior, you shall have it upon your posteriorums." "Ha," said the keeper, "my lord prior, my minion, my gentle lord prior, I pray God make you an abbot." "By the habit," said the monk, "which I wear, I will here make you a cardinal." "What? Do you use to pay ransoms to religious men? You shall therefore have by and by a red hat of my giving." And the fellow cried, "Ha, my lord prior, my lord abbot that shall be, my lord cardinal, my lord all." "Ha, ha, he's, no, my lord prior, my good little lord the prior, I yield, render and deliver myself up to you." "And I deliver thee," said the monk, "to all the devils in hell." Then at one stroke he cut off his head, cutting his scalp upon the temple bones, and lifting up in the upper part of the skull the two triangulary bones called sincipital, or the two bones bregmates, together with the sagittal commissure or dart-like seam which distinguisheth the right side of the head from the left, as also a great part of the coronal or forehead bone, by which terrible blow likewise he cut the two meninges or films which enwrap the brain, and made a deep wound in the brain's two posterior ventricles, and the cranium or skull abode hanging upon his shoulders by the skin of the pericranium behind, in form of a doctor's bonnet, black without and red within. Thus fell he down also to the ground stark dead. And presently the monk gave his horse the spur, and kept the way that the enemy held, who had met with Gargantua and his companions in the broad highway, and were so diminished of their number for the enormous slaughter that Gargantua had made with his great tree amongst them, as also Gymnast, Ponocrates, Eudaemon, and the rest, that they began to retreat disorderly and in great haste, as men altogether affrighted and troubled in both sense and understanding, and as if they had seen the very proper species and form of death before their eyes. Or rather, as when you see an ass with a briz or gadby under his tail, or fly that stings him, run hither and thither without keeping any path or way, throwing down his load to the ground, breaking his bridle and reins, and taking no breath nor rest, and no man can tell what ails him, for they see not anything touch him. So fled these people destitute of wit, without knowing any cause of flying, only pursued by a panic terror which in their minds they had conceived. The monk, perceiving that their whole intent was to betake themselves to their heels, alighted from his horse, and got upon a big large rock which was in the way, and with his great brackmard's sword laid such load upon those runaways, and with main strength fetching a compass with his arm, without feigning or sparing, slew and overthrew so many that his sword broke in two pieces. Then thought he within himself that he had slain and killed sufficiently, and that the rest should escape to carry news. Therefore he took up a battle-axe of those that lay there dead, and got upon the rock again, passing his time to see the enemy thus flying and to tumble himself amongst the dead bodies, only that he suffered none to carry pike, sword, lance, nor gun with him, and those who carried the pilgrims bound he made to alight, and gave their horses unto the said pilgrims, keeping them there with him under the hedge, and also Touchfaucet, who was then his prisoner. Chapter 1.45. How the monk carried along with him the pilgrims, and of the good words that Grangousier gave them. This skirmish being ended, Gargantua retreated with his men, excepting the monk, and about the dawning of the day they came unto Grangousier, who in his bed was praying unto God for their safety and victory. And seeing them all safe and sound, he embraced them lovingly, and asked what was become of the monk. Gargantua answered him that without doubt the enemies had the monk. Then have they mischief and ill luck, said Grangousier, which was very true. Therefore is it a common proverb to this day, to give a man the monk, or, as in French, lui bailor le moine, when they would express the doing unto one a mischief. Then commanded he a good breakfast to be provided for their refreshment. When all was ready, they called Gargantua, but he was so aggrieved that the monk was not to be heard of that he would neither eat nor drink. In the meanwhile the monk comes, and from the gate of the outer court cries out aloud, fresh wine, Gymnast my friend." Gymnast went out and saw that it was Friar John, who brought along with him 5 pilgrims and Touchfaucet prisoners. Whereupon Gargantua likewise went forth to meet him, and all of them made him the best welcome that possibly they could, and brought him before Grangousier, who asked him of all his adventures. The monk told him all, both how he was taken, how he rid himself of his keepers, of the slaughter he had made by the way, and how he had rescued the pilgrims and brought along with him Captain Touchfaucet. Then did they altogether fall to banqueting most merrily. In the meantime Grangousier asked the pilgrims what countrymen they were, whence they came, and whither they went. Swear-to-go in the name of the rest answered, My sovereign lord, I am of Saint Genu in Berry. This man is of Palvau, this other is of Anze, this of Argy, this of Saint Nazarand, and this man of Villebrennen. We come from Saint Sebastian near Nantes, and are now returning, as we best may, by easy journeys. Yea, but said Grangousier, what went you to do at Saint Sebastian? We went, said Swear-to-go, to offer up unto that sanct our vows against the plague. Ah, poor men! Said Grangousier, do you think that the plague comes from Saint Sebastian? Yes, truly, answered Swear-to-go, our preachers tell us so indeed. But is it so, said Grangousier, do the false prophets teach you such abuses? Do they thus blaspheme the sancts and holy men of God, as to make them like unto the devils, who do nothing but hurt unto mankind, as Homer writeth, that the plague was sent into the camp of the Greeks by Apollo, and as the poets feign a great rabble of Vejoves and mischievous gods. So did a certain Caffar or dissembling religionary preach at Sine, that Saint Anthony sent the fire into men's legs, that Saint Eutropius made men hydropic, Saint Cletus, fools, and that Saint Genu made them goutish. But I punished him so exemplarily, though he called me heretic for it, that since that time no such hypocritical rogue durst set his foot within my territories. And truly, I wonder that your king should suffer them in their sermons to publish such scandalous doctrine in his dominions. For they deserve to be chastised with greater severity than those who, by magical art, or any other device, have brought the pestilence into a country. The pest killeth but the bodies, but such abominable impostors empoison our very souls. As he spake these words, in came the monk very resolute and asked them, Whence are you, you poor wretches? Of Saint Genu, said they. And how, said the monk, does the abbot Gulligut, the good drinker and the monks, what cheer make they? By G-body, they'll have a fling at your wives, and breast them to some purpose, whilst you are upon your roaming rant and gadding pilgrimage. Hen, said Swear-to-go, I am not afraid of mine, for he that shall see her by day will never break his neck to come to her in the night time. Yea, Mary, said the monk, now you have hit it. Let her be as ugly as ever was Proserpina, she will once, by the Lord G, be overturned, and get her skin coat shaken, if there dwell any monks near to her. For a good carpenter will make use of any kind of timber. Let me be peppered with the pox, if you find not all your wives with child at your return, for the very shadow of the steeple of an abbey is fruitful. It is, said Gargantua, like the water of Nilus in Egypt, if you believe Strabo and Pliny lib. 7 Cap. 3. What virtue will there be then, said the monk, in their bullets of concupiscence, their habits and their bodies? Then, said Grangousier, go your ways, poor men, in the name of God the Creator, to whom I pray to guide you perpetually, and henceforward be not so ready to undertake these idle and unprofitable journeys. Look to your families, labor every man in his vocation, instruct your children, and live as the good apostle St. Paul directeth you. In doing whereof, God, his angels and sancts, will guard and protect you, and no evil or plague at any time shall befall you. Then Gargantua led them into the hall to take their refection. But the pilgrims did nothing but sigh, and said to Gargantua, Oh, how happy is that land which hath such a man for their lord! We have been more edified and instructed by the talk which he had with us, than by all the sermons that ever were preached in our town. This is, said Gargantua, that which Plato saith lib. 5 de Republi, that those commonwealths are happy, whose rulers philosophate and whose philosophers rule. Then caused he their wallets to be filled with victuals and their bottles with wine, and gave unto each of them a horse to ease them upon the way, together with some pence to live by. Chapter 1.46. How Grangousier did very kindly entertain Touchfaucet his prisoner. Touchfaucet was presented unto Grangousier, and by him examined upon the enterprise and attempt of Picrochole, what it was he could pretend to, or aim at, by the rustling stir and tumultuary coil of this his sudden invasion. Whereunto he answered, that his end and purpose was to conquer all the country, if he could, for the injury done to his cake bakers. It is too great an undertaking, said Grangousier, and, as the proverb is, he that grips too much holds fast but little. The time is not now as formerly, to conquer the kingdoms of our neighbor princes, and to build up our own greatness upon the loss of our nearest Christian brother. This imitation of the ancient Herculeses, Alexanders, Hannibals, Scipios, Caesars, and other such heroes is quite contrary to the profession of the gospel of Christ, by which we are commanded to preserve, keep, rule, and govern every man his own country and lands, and not in a hostile manner to invade others. And that which heretofore the barbars and Saracens called prowess and valor, we do now call robbing, thievery, and wickedness. It would have been more commendable in him to have contained himself within the bounds of his own territories, royally governing them, than to insult and domineer in mine, pillaging and plundering everywhere like a most unmerciful enemy. For, by ruling his own with discretion, he might have increased his greatness, but by robbing me he cannot escape destruction. Go your ways in the name of God, prosecute good enterprises, show your king what is amiss, and never counsel him with regard unto your own particular profit, for the public loss will swallow up the private benefit. As for your ransom, I do freely remit it to you, and will that your arms and horse be restored to you. So should good neighbors do, and ancient friends, seeing this our difference is not properly war. As Plato lib. 5 der Repub. Would not have it called war, but sedition, when the Greeks took up arms against one another, and that therefore, when such combustions should arise amongst them, his advice was to behave themselves in the managing of them with all discretion and modesty. Although you call it war, it is but superficial. It entereth not into the closet and inmost cabinet of our hearts. For neither of us hath been wronged in his honor, nor is there any question betwixt us in the main, but only how to redress, by the by some petty faults committed by our men I mean, both yours and ours, which, although you knew, you ought to let pass. For these quarrelsome persons deserve rather to be contemned than mentioned, especially seeing I offered them satisfaction according to the wrong. God shall be the just judge of our variances, whom I beseech by death rather to take me out of this life, and to permit my goods to perish and be destroyed before mine eyes, than that by me or mine he should in any sort be wronged. These words uttered, he called the monk, and before them all thus spoke unto him, Friar John, my good friend, it is you that took prisoner the Captain Touchfaucet here present. Sir, said the monk, seeing himself is here, and that he is of the years of discretion, I had rather you should know it by his confession than by any words of mine. Then said Touchfaucet, my sovereign lord, it is he indeed that took me, and I do therefore most freely yield myself his prisoner. Have you put him to any ransom? Said Grangousier to the monk. No, said the monk, of that I take no care. How much would you have for having taken him? Nothing, nothing, said the monk, I am not swayed by that, nor do I regard it. Then Grangousier commanded that, in presence of Touchfaucet, should be delivered to the monk, for taking him the sum of 62,000 saluts, in English money, 15,500 pounds, which was done, whilst they made a collation or little banquet to the said Touchfaucet, of whom Grangousier asked if he would stay with him, or if he loved rather to return to his king. Touchfaucet answered that he was content to take whatever course he would advise him to. Then, said Grangousier, return unto your king, and God be with you. Then he gave him an excellent sword of a Vienne blade, with a golden scabbard wrought with vine branch-like flourishes, of fair goldsmith's work, and a collar or neck chain of gold, weighing 702,000 marks at 8 ounces each, garnished with precious stones of the finest sort, esteemed at 160,000 ducats, and 10,000 crowns more, as an honorable donative by way of present. After this talk Touchfaucet got to his horse, and Gargantua for his safety allowed him the guard of 30 men-at-arms and 60 archers to attend him, under the conduct of Gymnast, to bring him even unto the gate of the rock Clermond, if there were need. As soon as he was gone, the monk restored unto Grangousier the 62,000 saluts which he had received, saying, Sir, it is not as yet the time for you to give such gifts. Stay till this war be at an end, for none can tell what accidents may occur, and war begun without good provision of money beforehand for going through with it, is but as a breathing of strength and blast that will quickly pass away. Coin is the sinews of war. "Well then," said Grangasir, "at the end I will content you by some honest recompense, as also all those who shall do me good service." Chapter 1.47 How Grangasir sent for his legions, and how Touchfaucet slew Rashkef, and was afterwards executed by the command of Picrochole. About this same time those of Bess, of the Old Market, of St. James, Burg, of the Dragage of Peril, of the rivers, of the rock St. Paul, of the Vaubreton of Potil, of the Brehimont, of Clainbridge, of Cravant, of Grammont, of the town at the Badgerholes, of Heims, of Segur, of Huss, of St. Lovent, of Panzoust, of the Coldrocks, of Varin, of Coulaines, of Chose, of Varens, of Burgil, of the Bouchard Island, of the Crowley, of Narcé, of Cand, of Montsoreau, and other bordering places, sent ambassadors unto Grangasir, to tell him that they were advised of the great wrongs which Picrochole had done him, and, in regard of their ancient confederacy, offered him what assistance they could afford, both in men, money, victuals, and ammunition, and other necessaries for war. The money which by the joint agreement of them all was sent unto him amounted to 60 and 14 millions, 2 crowns and a half of pure gold. The forces wherewith they did assist him did consist in 15,000 cuirassiers, 32,000 light horsemen, 69,000 dragoons, and 140,000 volunteer adventurers. These had with them 11,200 cannons, double cannons, long pieces of artillery called basilisks, and smaller-sized ones known by the name of spearalls, besides the mortar pieces and granados. Of pioneers they had 47,000, all victualled and paid for 6 months and 4 days of advance, which offer Gargantua did not altogether refuse, nor wholly accept of, but giving them hearty thanks, said that he would compose and order the war by such a device, that there should not be found great need to put so many honest men to trouble in the managing of it. And therefore was content at that time to give order only for bringing along the legions which he maintained in his ordinary garrison towns of the Divinière, of Chavigny, of Gravatt, and of the Quinquinais, amounting to the number of 2,000 cuirassiers, 66,000 foot soldiers, 26,000 dragoons, attended by 200 pieces of great ordnance, 22,000 pioneers, and 6,000 light horsemen, all drawn up in troops, so well befitted and accommodated with their commissaries, sutlers, farriers, harness-makers, and other such like necessary members in a military camp, so fully instructed in the art of warfare, so perfectly knowing and following their colors, so ready to hear and obey their captains, so nimble to run, so strong at their charging, so prudent in their adventures, and every day so well disciplined, that they seemed rather to be a concert of organ pipes or mutual concord of the wheels of a clock, than an infantry and cavalry or army of soldiers. Touchfaucet immediately after his return presented himself before Picrochole, and related unto him at large all that he had done and seen, and at last endeavored to persuade him with strong and forcible arguments to capitulate and make an agreement with Grangasir, whom he found to be the honestest man in the world, saying further that it was neither right nor reason thus to trouble his neighbors, of whom they had never received anything but good. And in regard of the main point, that they should never be able to go through stitch with that war, but to their great damage and mischief. For the forces of Picrochole were not so considerable, but that Grangasir could easily overthrow them. He had not well done speaking when Rashkaf said out aloud, "Unhappy is that prince which is by such men served, who are so easily corrupted, as I know Touchfaucet is. For I see his courage so changed that he had willingly joined with our enemies to fight against us and betray us, if they would have received him. But as virtue is of all, both friends and foes, praised and esteemed, so is wickedness soon known and suspected, and although it happen the enemies to make use thereof for their profit, yet have they always the wicked and the traitors in abomination." Touchfaucet being at these words very impatient, drew out his sword, and therewith ran Rashkaf through the body, a little under the nipple of his left side, whereof he died presently, and pulling back his sword out of his body said boldly, "So let him perish that shall a faithful servant blame." Picrochole incontinently grew furious, and seeing Touchfaucet's new sword and his scabbard so richly diapered with flourishes of most excellent workmanship, said, "Did they give thee this weapon so feloniously therewith to kill before my face my so good friend Rashkaf?" Then immediately commanded he his guard to hew him in pieces, which was instantly done, and that so cruelly that the chamber was all dyed with blood. Afterwards he appointed the corpse of Rashcalf to be honorably buried, and that of Touchfaucet to be cast over the walls into the ditch. The news of these excessive violences were quickly spread through all the army, whereupon many began to murmur against Picrochole, in so far that Pinchpenny said to him, "My sovereign lord, I know not what the issue of this enterprise will be. I see your men much dejected, and not well resolved in their minds, by considering that we are here very ill provided of victual, and that our number is already much diminished by 3 or 4 sallies. Furthermore, great supplies and recruits come daily in to your enemies, but we so moulder away that, if we be once besieged, I do not see how we can escape a total destruction." "Tush, pish," said Picrochole, "you are like the melon eels, you cry before they come to you. Let them come if they dare.